Our year of Shiurim, her series has been sponsored by Lili Nishmas Avram ben Yonah Yaakov and also Almog ben Yigal. And the Neshamas should have an aliyah. We are up to chapter 5. Okay, chapter 5, new chapter, which is doubt and certainty. Doubt and certainty on page 51. Okay? Now, a close examination of human difficulties will reveal that at their root lies doubt. Not knowing with full confidence what one's direction is. Yes. Not knowing with full confidence what one's direction should be is the most energy-sapping element in our lives. In depth, all our existential tension and anxiety stem from doubt. Okay, so in Hebrew, the word for doubt is actually safek, and he's going to speak about that a little bit later on. Very often, when we know what we need to do, that's when it becomes easier. It's that stage when we have those, we're uncertain which way to turn. What is the correct path of action, whether it's to do with one's job, whether it's to do with a relationship, whether it's just to do with, the way that one leads one's life, Definitely, remember those times when, as a young person, you're still kind of like finding, your path, your direction, you're searching for your identity. And that's difficult. It's very, very stressful. And of course, even as we get older, those things maybe aren't as kind of existential as they were, but there's still a lot of times when we're simply not sure what to do. Once we know what to do, then fine, then you're already kind of on the path and you're already on the way. But the doubt itself, that is one of the most challenging things. He continues, in isolated ordeals and life in general, we struggle most profoundly to identify the correct path, and it seems impossible. Very often, the problem lies not in finding the strength to cope with adversity. One feels one would go through fire willingly if only one knew in which direction. If only we could be sure that this or that particular path were correct in an absolute sense, that it would not let us down unpredictably, we would find the raw courage to walk that path. But that's not our experience. We choose a direction, perhaps feeling that this must be the correct one, and tomorrow we are forced to wonder how we could possibly have seen things that way yesterday. The situation appears exactly opposite now. So we do make a decision sometimes, and then we have that angst of, did I make the right decision? Maybe I should have done something different. And of course, the next day we feel even more confused. Eventually, we lose confidence over the page in our sense of direction altogether. Life is a halting, faltering business, 3 steps ahead today and 2 backwards tomorrow, and so often no more than helpless circles with the dismay of crossing our own tracks repeatedly. Okay, so maybe something that we can identify with, especially when there's a big life decision. And sometimes it's very hard to know. It's not easy and it's challenging to make the decision in the first place. And then after one makes a decision, then one isn't sure whether I did make the right decision or not. So all of these things, this is the challenge that we're going to be sort of speaking about and trying to understand and analyze in this chapter. Let's dissect this matter. He continues. The mystics call this world Alma Desveka, as that word suffix, a world of doubt. Intrinsically, the world is a confusing mixture of good and bad, true and false. It is also called Alma Deshikra, a world of falsehood. However, the deepest essence of that falsehood is that it contains a mixture of good. If not for the component of good, it could never exist, and therein lies the confusion. In fact, the most dangerous forms of falsehood are those which contain almost all truth. They are the most deceptive. Nothing in the world is entirely good or bad. Every choice, every decision has a cost, and in many ordeals, the combination of factors on either side of the moral choice is so complex that we respond with paralysis. So a couple of things. Firstly, 2 important statements. The Chazal say that the challenges of this world mean that it's even named Alma Desveka, the world of doubt, or the world of falsehood. Because the things that we see in this world as being the most important things sometimes actually are the least important. The things that look huge and impressive really ultimately might be a lot of nothing. Having recently been in America, one of the things that I am thoroughly unimpressed by is Times Square. I've been there before, actually, and Tehillah was determined to go. It's one of the sort of must-see things in America. And for those of you that have been, it's just a vast amount of advertising, right? That's all it is, right? And there's these huge neon signs, and it looks like it's daytime, even though it's the middle of the night. And that's it. And there's nothing there. And it looks, from the outside like, wow, an incredible thing. But to be honest, there's nothing there. And that's like this Alma Shikra. You can have this world of falsehood where there's no substance,
It's in the sink still.
no substance to any of it. It's they're trying to sell you things, at best, trying to sort of dangle the next fad in front of you so that maybe at one point, you'll buy it, that, right? But there's no real substance to it. And that's, and also the Alma Shikra, the world of falsehood, where the things which can be exciting, they look good, but it doesn't mean that they're true. It doesn't mean there's anything right. Doesn't mean that there's anything intrinsically good about them. That's the world that we live in, and that's the challenge, really, of living in this world. And as he says, it's never as simple as all or nothing. Very rarely do you have something which is all good or something which is all bad. Very often there is a mixture. There's a mixture of both of those things, and that's where we get into the world of suffering, the world of doubt. Very often as Jewish people, we speak about a balance. For example, we have an obligation to learn. We have an obligation to learn Torah. At the same time as having an obligation to learn Torah, we also have an obligation to have a family. And in addition to that, we also have an obligation to make a living. So we've got an obligation to do all of those things, plus on top of that, the obligation to do all of the mitzvahs. How are we supposed to do all of those things? What are we supposed to do? Which one is it? Which one is, and obviously the answer is balance. Because if we do only one of those things, not the other, then we have missed the point. So the whole idea is that we're able to balance, because these things you'll always have in the world, you'll have the necessity to balance. And therefore, as well, even those things which seem to be bad, there's going to be some good. And those things which are good, there's always going to be some bad in them as well. And again, hence the confusion. Hence why we're often unsure. Another thing, by the way, I found, which is very confusing for people, is the concept of argument, the concept of machlokus, which means very often there will be more than one opinion. So whether you're learning something and you discover there's more than one opinion, whether you're investigating a certain halacha and the correct way to act, and there is more than one opinion. As human beings, we don't like that. We like certainty. We like there to be just one way. I get this very often. People ask me a question. Just tell me what I should do. Which one should I do? Which one should I follow? Which I do. That's my job, to tell them which one I should follow. But we have to be able sometimes to realize there are going to be different paths and different approaches, more than one opinion. We look at other people and the way that they practice Judaism, and sometimes we can't cope with the fact that they do it differently from us. We have to be able to get used to the fact that there is doubt, there is different opinions, different ways of doing things, and different approaches. Let's see how he's going to approach this. Okay. Page 52 towards the bottom. What's the source of doubt underlying this Alma Desveika, the world of doubt? The answer, of course, must be in the Torah. In the Torah's description of how the human condition came to be what it is. Adam Arishon, so Adam, the very first human being, was faced with the primal choice to obey Hashem's command and refrain from eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or to disobey. He has a choice. Listen to Hashem, don't eat from the tree, or to disobey. The world he experienced was perfect. The tree, however, held the awesome power to loose evil into the world. A striking question which must be asked is, why is the tree referred to as the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Surely it should be named the tree of the knowledge of evil. It is the source of evil in the creation. Why good and evil? Okay, meaning Adam is told there's only one mitzvah that you have to keep. When he's in Gan Eden, he's in the Garden of Eden. One mitzvah you have to keep. Don't eat from the Eitz Hadas, from the tree of knowledge. So therefore that tree has got to be bad, right? So it should be the tree of knowledge of evil. Why is it called the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Why is that good and evil? So he continues, but that is the point exactly. If the tree were of evil only, that evil would be so easily identifiable, so odious and hideous that no one would ever engage it. It would be the most obvious thing in the world to avoid and never present a temptation or an ordeal. It is the knowledge of good and evil combined or confused, which is the problem. Very clever idea. The tree was not all evil. It was the tree of good and evil, because that's always the challenge. The challenge is always, there seems to be something here which looks good. It looks correct and it looks tantalizing. And it looks like actually this will be good for me. And that was exactly the same thing that Adam had. And exactly the same reason that he failed. Not because he wanted to do something that was bad. It would be easy to avoid if it was all bad, if it was intrinsically wrong and intrinsically bad. Problem is when something is both good and bad, it's good and evil. He continues, knowledge, das, always means intimate association or intrinsic bonding. The tree combines good and evil so thoroughly that after its fruit is ingested, the human becomes a tangled knot of both elements, that is, of good and evil. No situation is entirely clear thereafter. Never can we completely separate our lower selves, our vested interests, from our pure core dimension. And that is the problem. Meaning what happens after Adam eats from that tree is that knowledge of good and evil comes into us. It becomes part of who we are as a human being. And therefore we cannot separate the good and the bad, the physical and the spiritual, the emes and the sheker, the truth and the falsehood. We're unable to determine exactly how to separate those two things. And that becomes part of, if you like, what it means to be a human being. He continues, that is the root of all sadness. The Hebrew word for weeping is bechi, from the root meaning to be lost in confusion. Mevucha is a confusion. The word for a tear, the eyes issue in weeping, is dim'ah, from a root meaning a mixture of the pure and the profane, dema. Very interesting. So the words for sadness both actually come in Hebrew from the words for confusion or mixture. Bechi, which is to cry, from mevucha, which is a confusion. Dim'ah, a tear, from the word dema, which means a mixture. So once again, it's that same idea that it's the mixture that itself is the hard thing. When Adam confronted that tree, he was pure and the world was pure. Evil existed only as an objective, dispassionate possibility external to himself. When he ate the fruit, evil became internalized within him and within the goodness of the world. And now the human mind can never resolve its doubts entirely, never read the world plainly as the open book it once was. No wonder the mystics refer to the tree of knowledge of good and evil as Ilana de Sveika, the tree of doubt. Meaning, what happens is that this concept of good and evil being mixed, that enters into the human being, that becomes part of the human condition. And let's continue. What happens after man eats from the tree? Adam eats from the tree and hides in the garden on page 54, hides from Hashem who's everywhere. How could Adam imagine that he could hide? Adam Arishan, right? He's created by Hashem. He knows what's going on. He knows what God is. God is infinite. God is all-knowing. God is omnipotent. How could it be that he could hide from him? He knew Hashem as no human has ever. He knew that Hashem is all-seeing and all-knowing. How could he hope to escape by hiding? The answer is he no longer sees reality clearly. On the one hand, he knows Hashem exists. That is why he's hiding. On the other hand, he thinks incredibly that he can hide. What a deeply pathetic figure he's become. Hiding from that which he knows is inescapable and fooling himself anyway. Isn't that the description of our lives? I once heard actually from Rabbi Shlomo Brevda Zatzal, who was a great orator, speaker. He lived in America, he used to come to Israel every so often when I was in yeshiva. He said to us, I remember this, and I was learning in yeshiva at the time, and he said, Bocherem, he said, every time you do an Aveira, when you do something wrong, he said, you know what the problem is? He says, it's not the Aveira that's the problem. You forgot Hashem existed. You didn't have Emunah. Right? Because if you think about it, it's nonsensical. You know that Hashem exists. Right. You believe in God. Yeah, believe in God. You believe that God is everywhere. Yeah, he's all-knowing. Yeah, believe in all of that. Right. So then why did you eat the thing that you're not supposed to eat? Why did you, go and do that on Shabbos when you weren't supposed to? Why did you speak Lashon Hara? What was happening? So the answer is that we have this good and evil which is mixed within us, just like Adam Arishan is hiding from God, which seems to be nonsensical. Far more shocking, he continues, is Hashem's response. Hashem appears in the garden and says to Adam, where are you? Ayeka, the creator of the universe who sees all and knows, asks, where are you? As if he can't see Adam. I mean, what is going on? Right? Surely Hashem knows where Adam is. So why does Hashem's voice say the word Ayeka? Where are you? He continues, when man attempts to hide and blur reality into a crazy fractured version of itself, Hashem responds in kind and allows man to see the world that way. Measure for measure exactly. You wish to escape my notice? You want to feel independent and hidden? Where are you? Man is allowed to perceive falsely that he is alone, the greatest pain of all, meaning Hashem mirrors our actions. And therefore, the human being that forgets God, Hashem says, so I'll act as if I'm not there. The human being who's hiding from Hashem, Hashem comes along and says, as if I can't find you, Ayeka, where are you? A person wonders, like, where was Hashem when, dot, dot, dot. But very often, we've already pushed Hashem out of our lives. And Hashem will mirror that we have done. He'll mirror that action that we have done. And we're we the initiator of that. This goes even deeper. Have a look. The Jewish people's arch rival is Amalek, the nation of Amalek. The numerical value of Amalek and Safek is identical. Amalek and Safek have the same numerical value. The descendant of Amalek who tried to destroy the entire Jewish people was Haman. In the Purim story, he's a descendant of Amalek. The Gemara indicates his name in the Garden of Eden at the time of Adam's sin. When Hashem asks Adam that question, did you eat from the tree? The word of the Torah is Hamin ha'etz. Hamin is the same letters as the word Haman. Hey, mem, nun. Hamin. The gap between reality and our perception, the gap of doubt, opens with the sin, and that is our enemy. Which means when Adam eats from the tree, that allows this force of Haman, of Amalek, into the world, which creates Safek, which creates a doubt in our perception of reality. And instead of seeing the world as we did in the Garden of Eden, with clarity, with God's presence, and conscious of his all-being and all-knowing, now enters into the world this element of Safek, this element of doubt. That's what Amalek represents. And that's what causes the gap between what we know up here and the way that we act down there. After his expulsion from the garden, Adam cannot go back. Placed as guards outside the garden are beings wielding swords. The swords are unusual. Page 55. They flash blades, turning continually. La v'cherev hamisapeches. The blade of the turning sword. There are commentaries who explain this symbolism. The turning sword is the lethal weapon of doubt. Today, one's reality appears thus, and tomorrow it's different. It's always changing. A man cannot find the road back to the garden. The garden keeps eluding him and the road keeps changing. Not only is he confused about where he is, but the road back to clarity is in doubt as well. That is the condition of us as human beings, which we get from the Garden of Eden, and that's perhaps one of the greatest challenges that we have, which is not knowing what is the correct path. Once we've worked out what the correct path to do, then things are a lot easier. So very often, and maybe in the course of the week, something that we can work on is when we have a challenge and we have something that's bothering us, or when we're being tugged in different directions, let's try and stop and just think to ourselves for 1 second, what is the correct thing? What is the right thing in this situation? What does Hashem want from us? Very often, if we can answer that question and try to remove the element of doubt, that helps to remove the anxiety, helps to remove the challenge, that's halfway, we're already halfway through the ordeal. If we can answer that question, if we can have the absolute clarity, what does Hashem want from me in this situation? We will stop there for this week.